I've got 7 reasons as to why this was my least favorite event in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Hello guys and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are taking a look at the Fusion Cup, which as you can see, I didn't even finish. I didn't get to the final duel level max. And that is for 2 reasons. One, I got to duel level 17 twice with 2 different accounts, once with Dark Lords, which took me way too long, and once I did it in like a day from like 13 to 17. So there's that, and I just had no desire to continue playing. And 2 is because I actually don't want to get to duel level max because I just can't play this event anymore. It's been so lame. And here are my reasons for that. I have 7 different reasons as to why this is the case, starting with number 1. First and foremost, it's another event that is centered around competition, or like a competitive style ranked ladder-esque climb that you do, similar to that of the Duelist Cup or the WCQ. And quite frankly, we already do too many of those, because when you put it into perspective, this event took the space of another event that would have been more casual, right? So now, instead of having the Duelist Cup and then 2 events, or 2 event slots, where we could have played something more casual and more fun, it's now Duelist Cup and 1.5 because of the Legend Anthology. So it's just taking away from the ability to play other formats, to play other game modes, and it's kind of frustrating, right? Because it's just like, okay, if people want to play competitively, that's great. They're probably having a great time. But if people want to play a more casual, fun, open experience, like, this is not it. It's just not, right? Because it's very similar to that of Ranked, where all of the stuff is available. There's very little in terms of a ban list, and that brings me into the point 2, which is the bad ban list and the fact that it is just basically ranked, right? For example, I ended up playing this deck and it got me pretty high pretty quick, and you could see there's a bunch of cards that they're just missing when it comes to bannings or limitations, right? Super polymerization in the Fusion event. I get it. It technically makes sense, right? But also, this is like the one card that's always going to be applicable. That's just always going to do what it needs to do. And it's like, oh, we're going to allow this, right? We allow Maxi, you know, the Charmies still exist. Branded is basically untouched. Hooray. And I know the branded support is relatively new, but we had another event that was entirely branded centric. We're making another one entirely branded centric, because it's not like they actually banned anything or changed anything to make it so that branded wasn't going to be the top deck. No, branded's the top deck again, alongside the Draco Tail cards, things that we've been playing for quite some time. And as much as I love Draco Tail, like, can we play something else? I get that it's a Fusion event, but there's a bunch of other Fusion decks. Heck, the Loners, for example, are 3 different decks, which brings me into my 3rd point, the Loners. The Loner decks are super lame. And it's not because I don't like these decks. Shaddoll and Dark Lord are 2 of my most favorite decks of all time. I love these decks. The problem is, these are bad lists. We don't have Sanctified in the Dark Lord deck. We're playing a whole bunch of random crap that's not worth it at all. We're playing Puri Ray Map in a deck that requires you to pay life points to activate their effects. Why are we playing Puri Ray Map? And it's a bunch of stuff like that, where it's just like, oh, great, here's a whole bunch of bad deck lists that's going to make you not want to play the new archetype. Not to mention, GMX also exists in here, which I think is fine as a loner deck, but it's also just a bad deck, and I had no incentive to play it, especially seeing what other people did with the deck, because I played against it quite a few times, and dear Atlanta, this deck doesn't do anything. So, yeah, that's not going to make me want to play against the deck, and that was the case for all of these. Like, watching Dark Lord fumble around, trying to figure out how to actually do anything. It was just a nightmare, you know? Shaddoll, I think, actually had the ability to do stuff, but I saw Shaddoll maybe once. I really didn't see it all that often, because it's Shaddoll. It's a super old deck. It's not one that people are going to be incentivized to play inherently. And the new support is fine, but it doesn't change the game plan. It doesn't change the play style. It doesn't add it doesn't make Shaddoll like an actual competitive deck. It's not capable of keeping up with something like Branded, right? Hell, it can't even keep up with Hero, which just got support. And it's just like, okay, great. I guess I won't play the loner decks. Instead, I'll play more of the decks that we've seen all the time in Ranked. Which brings me into my fourth point, which is the fact that this is basically just Ranked. Again, sure, we don't have like Cool Tune or Radiant Typhoon or something like that, but it's so similar to Ranked because you still have things like Branded and Draco Tail and Hero and a bunch of the... Odeon is playable in this event, which is, hey, I'll take it. At least Odeon's playable in an event. But it's also one of those things where it's just like, what's the point, right? If we're playing these events, why would it not be more akin to that of an event? Something different, right? This doesn't even feel like a fusion event. It feels like just a regular day. Because you still have links. You still have synchros. I know, crazy, right? But yeah, there's still synchros. There's still Xyz. You know, Hero still has access to all of its synchro or link monsters to be able to access all of their fusion spells and what have you, right? You have access to all of the like generic fusion links like Crosssheep and Verte, right? Wickcat exists for Fairy Tail. Condemned exists for Dark Lord, right? And the list goes on, where it's just a bunch of these archetypes and a bunch of these decks that Konami wanted you to play just don't have any restrictions. So there's no change from regular gameplay, from like advanced or from ranked. So, okay, the gimmick is thrown out the window. Not to mention that, again, point number 5 is that we just had a fusion event. Why are we doing another fusion event? I don't want to play fusion into fusion. At least shake up the extra deck mechanic. Oh, but the previous one also had Xyz. So does this one. That's the point. It's so lame. It's like, okay, we had one branded-centric event. Let's do a second branded-centric event. And let's make it competitive. And it's like, why? Who would want this? Branded players, obviously. But, like, the vast majority of players want something at least more casual, something that's more generically applicable, something they can just kind of like pick up and play and don't have to grind to get the rewards for. The amount of times I had people be like, yeah, dude, this event is just, it's a slog. I don't like it. It was every day. Anytime I streamed, people were like, hey, this is kind of boring. I don't want to, like, I can't play my favorite decks. A lot of Dark Lord players were like, man, dude, Dark Lord sucks. I wish it didn't. I wish I could actually play the game, but I can't. And that brings me into my 6th point, which is, well, actually, I'll come back to that one. Because the last thing I wanted to mention is that oh, no. I brought up everything. The last thing I wanted to mention was that the planned metagame was something that we had just seen within Ranked, which was technically a point that I had already brought up. But there you go. There's the 6th point. And then the 7th one was, in fact, the fact that all of the decks that I personally really enjoyed were just so much worse than this. As much as I love Dark Lord, it is leagues behind just everything right now. It is so much worse. And I love Dark Lord, and I'm capable of competing with Dark Lord, and I'm capable of making it good and making it work. But, like, it drained me to try and play it. And it's one of those things where it's like, you have created an event where Dark Lord could be really good, and it could be competitive if they had curated a ban list more specifically for this event that was more interesting, or that incentivized, or not incentivized, but like allowed for more decks to be playable, right? And there just wasn't really room for that. The only decks that ever gave me pause were Branded or Hero. That was it. And there's a bunch of other fusion decks that technically exist, but the vast majority of those other decks are pretty bad in comparison. Now, Fairy Tail also was pretty good, to be fair. But the point is that when the metagame is so small because they are so much better than everything else, it makes it really unfun if you want to play a bunch of those other decks. And I totally understand why it was, why like tier 0 decks or tier 0 formats suck, right? We all know, having to play against Cool Toon over and over and over again, if you're not playing Cool Toon, sucks. Like, that's just not fun. And that's what it was for me, right? So that's obviously a subjective thing. I'm not saying that that was like an inherent problem with the event, but it does mean that like a bunch of decks and a bunch of people who don't like branded had a terrible time and we're just not having fun, right? Dark Lord players, Shadal players, GMX players, the things that people or Konami wants you to buy and are selling you with the loner decks, they just weren't fun. Great idea. And that's why it's just, I don't know, this one was just my least favorite by a mile. Not a fun event for me. I'd love to know what you guys think. Do you guys agree? Do you guys think that it was a good event? Do you think it was a bad event? Did you enjoy the format? Did you not enjoy the format? What are your overall thoughts? I'd love to know, because obviously I had a very different experience than I think was intended, just because I was only playing Dark Lord, and at least for the vast majority of it. Once I switched to this, it was very easy to climb, but it was just one of those more frustrating events for me. I just didn't like it. It was really boring. That was the other thing. None of the games felt fun. Even if they were technically good games, I was bored. Because it's Fusion, I just don't like Fusion. That's it. But, yeah, I'm going to call it quits there. Thank you guys so much for watching. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.